Here we go. I apologize first and foremost for a no song of the day. I don't have time to do that with all the trip stuff and everything else. So get ready for the fun ride. Here is the last couple slides from the Unit 10 course. Moving on to the turning point of the Civil War. This is the point where the North starts winning the war. This is a huge turning point. It is the Battle of Gettysburg, which is the first and pretty much only battle fought directly in the North. It's fought up in Pennsylvania. We'll be visiting there in a couple weeks. It is won by the North, like you see by the flag. The North brings almost everything they have. There's General Meade, there's General Reynolds, there's a guy named Colonel Chamberlain who you'll see in a movie. The South brings everything they have. You have General Stuart. You have General, who's Jeb Stuart, the guy in charge of the cavalry. General George Pickett, whose charge will be famous for this battle. General Longstreet, who's kind of taken over for General Stonewall Jackson, and Robert E. Lee. Both sides, what starts pretty much as a battle for boots, the South comes in the area of Gettysburg to get a train full of boots or to kind of grab a train full of boots for their soldiers. And the North responds by sending their soldiers. And the next day, it is one of the largest battles of the Civil War. There's over 150,000 soldiers involved in it. It's basically the North is afraid that the South is coming into to the North to try to invade and then go on and capture D.C. If you look, this will be the first time that Robert E. Lee is defeated by the Northern armies, and he retreats back to Virginia because of this. The South was trying to win here and then push south into Washington, D.C. The two major parts of the battle, if you look down here at the map, this is on the second and third day. You have the Union, which is green. They form a shape of a fish hook, which is defensive. Down here you have a hill called Culp's Hill or Spangler's Spring, and you have area here. You have the area at the bottom, which is two hills, Little Round Top and Big Round Top, which will be scenes in a movie you will watch as well. The area of Big Round Top is defended, actually Little Round Top, which is a smaller hill, is defended by Colonel Chamberlain, who is an ex-teacher. And they end up pushing back the South. The South, if you look at the red lines over here, the South is trying to flank or go around the map. And at Little Round Top, Colonel Chamberlain's able to push his men. Actually, they run out of bullets, and they actually run down the hill with their bayonets fixed at the men for the South, who end up surrendering because they're amazed that the North would charge down a hill, giving up their spot on the top. So that's on the second day of fighting. On the third and final day, the area right here where the arrows are is called Pickett's Charge. Robert E. Lee issues General George Pickett, who sends about 15,000 Southern troops across a field right here in the middle to get to this copse of trees, which is a couple trees where we'll see on the trip. It's the meeting point, and Robert E. Lee's idea is to destroy the fish hook right in the middle, cut it in half, and then let his men flank around both sides. And the bad thing is that Pickett's Charge is just a group of men, 15,000 men, kind of walking across to their deaths. The North has prepared for this. The North prepares, at least thinking that General Lee might do something like this, so they move all their cannons to the middle. Their best sharpshooters as well. They wait till they're in musket distance, and they just come up from their hill and start rifling them down. If you look, here's a picture of the closest advance the South got to the wall that the North made. So after Pickett's Charge, the South goes back, being defeated pretty easily, actually over 3 days, being defeated by the North, which is a huge major victory, one of the biggest ones since Antietam. And this definitely turns the tides of the war. It's into the third year now. The North can keep doing this, whereas the South is really starting to run out of soldiers for battles like this, especially sending people into something like Pickett's Charge. The next battle is Chickamauga. That's how you say it. It's fought down in Georgia. If you look, there's the battle flag of the South, or that's the actual country's flag of the South, sorry, and there's the country flag of the Americas, or of the United States of America. This is another Southern victory. So even though the North is starting to win the war overall, the South is still winning battles, especially fought in the South. If you look, again, the North is still missing that constant leadership, that good general that's going to be good on an everyday basis. Here down in Chickamauga in Georgia, the North looks confused and chaotic. Just to show you how brothers fought brothers, sometimes Lincoln's brother-in-law, his wife's brother, is killed fighting for the South during this battle. And again, huge numbers of casualties. The next battle is kind of three battles wrapped into one: Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Cold Harbor. This goes on for almost a month, fought in Virginia. Again, it's the North trying to invade to get to Richmond. The South defends Richmond once again, or defends themselves in these three spots in Virginia. The North has now switched over to a new general. His name is Ulysses S. Grant. He's been promoted from the area around Mississippi to now he's in charge of the entire Union Army. He has in his control 120,000 soldiers during these three big battles. For the South, it's still the same guys, Longstreet, Jeb Stuart, and Robert E. Lee. Their army is starting to dwindle down. Now they're down to 64,000 soldiers. So again, as time is going on, the South is losing more and more men. This is a 6-week battle. During this battle, the cavalry lieutenant Jeb Stuart is killed, so the South loses one of their better generals. One of the things Ulysses S. Grant is remembered for is losing between 3,000 and 7,000 men in a 40-minute time span at Cold Harbor. His men move into like an area like a big giant ditch, and the South kind of overlooks the thing, and they just start shooting people like it's target practice. And that's something Ulysses S. Grant goes on to kind of regret doing for the rest of his life. All right, the next thing itself is not actually a battle. It's more of a battle tactic or a war tactic, and this is William Tecumseh Sherman's March to the Sea. He is in charge of a new army. He had Ulysses S. Grant's army from the west. He was the army that was leading out west in the Mississippi River. He has now gone to the south near Atlanta, and he is awaiting his ex-general, or Ulysses S. Grant, and Abe Lincoln's word of what to do. When he gets to Atlanta on November 16th, he is told, or he begins to, use total war, which for him is destroying everything. Farms, plantations, he's destroying homes, he's kicking out slaves and people, he's destroying railroad tracks, he's destroying factories. Anything that this northern army comes across, they are destroying for a 60-mile wide path that goes from Atlanta to the ocean, which goes 425 miles or so. This total war is supposed to scare the southern people into surrendering as well as their soldiers. War itself is okay if soldiers are fighting soldiers. Now that you bring in families and homes and everything into it, this is a tactic to make the South surrender or push their generals to surrender. The bad thing is that it does create damage. It creates over $100 million in damage for the South, which if the North does win, Abe Lincoln's in charge of putting it back together. So this is a huge thing. And in this case, the quote is William Tecumseh Sherman said that he was going to make Georgia howl. He was going to hurt it enough like a dog to kind of make it howl. He sent Abe Lincoln a telegraph on December 21st saying that he had got to the ocean, kind of like a Christmas present, showing him that the North was causing destruction or creating destruction, trying to scare the South into surrendering. The last major battle for your notes is the Battle of Petersburg, which is in Virginia right outside of Richmond. It's on April 2nd of 1865. The Americans win, or the Northern Americans, the Union forces win here. Now you have both Union armies meeting. You have the army of General Sherman from the South, who was just making Georgia howl, and you have Ulysses S. Grant, the Army of the Potomac and the Army of the North, kind of meeting together at Petersburg, surrounding Robert E. Lee and General Pickett in the last of the Southern defenses. The stars and stripes are raised in Richmond, the capital, showing that we've captured the flag in a way, or captured the capital, and casualties are over 17,000. But now that the Americans have captured Richmond, it's just a matter of time before the surrender takes place. The final surrender comes on April 9th of 1865 at Appomattox Courthouse, which is actually just a city named Appomattox Courthouse. Both major generals are there. You see the painting of Ulysses S. Grant sitting down with Robert E. Lee and the generals in the background. It's basically just a sit-down meeting where they agree to things. And Ulysses S. Grant had a nickname. His nickname in the newspapers was U.S. Grant, and people called him Unconditional Surrender Grant, meaning that he never, when a group surrendered to him, he was going to take their guns and their horses, their ammunition, their supplies, and everything, and their flags. Well, now this time he's being very polite to Robert E. Lee. He wants this war to end. It's been 4 horrific years almost into the 5. And Ulysses S. Grant lets Robert E. Lee, lets his men take their horses and their swords and their flags, but not he lets them take their guns and everything. He just wants the South to surrender and have this war end. And when they finally do surrender, there's over 620,000 casualties for the North and South combined. And in class, I had already gone over that the surrender takes place in Wilmer McLean's house, who he can positively say that the war ended in his living room but began in his backyard because he owned a plantation or a farm up in Bull Run or Manassas, where the first major battle of the Civil War began almost in his backyard. So he can say the Civil War started in his backyard and ended at this house where he moved to in Appomattox Courthouse during the war. History fact. All right. The last couple things just to go over in your notes. The ironclads, these are new boats made out of iron that are meant not to sink. The North and South make them. When they shoot at each other, it's basically just a show of force. If you look at all the wooden boats sinking in the background, these two boats are not. And they just fire cannonballs at each other, which bounce off. It's just a show of force for both countries. Neither country sinks the opposite ironclad. But when both ironclads turn around and go back home, the rest of the world is very frightened. The rest of the world kind of pees themselves because they don't have the technology to make these ironcladded boats float, and use steam-powered technology and also put cannons on them. So these two boats can literally sink most of the navies in the world by themselves. On the bottom, you have the first successful submarine mission, which is called the Hunley. If you look at it, it's the size of a row of desks. It does sink, even though it is successful. It does stab. If you look at the end right here, there's a metal pole that stabs a charge or a depth charge into a boat. And when it blows up, as it's pulling away, it cracks a little leak in the top, and the Southern submarine sinks to the bottom of Charleston Harbor, I believe it is. And those people were just recovered, or the bodies were recovered with the submarine just a few years ago. There's Robert E. Lee's house in Arlington, Virginia. It was taken over by Union forces and controlled for the rest of the war because Robert E. Lee owed $90-some in tax money to the federal government. And when he left, he told his wife to get out of there because the Union forces were going to try to take it. It is her house or her family's home. They do take it, and they end up turning his property or her property into Arlington National Cemetery, which we will, again, visit in a couple weeks. All right. These are the pictures of a concentration camp, which you learned about in 8th grade English class this year. There is the only man, Henry Wirtz, a Southern soldier, who was in charge of Andersonville. He was convicted of war crimes or doing something illegal. These are two pictures of men that are alive. These people are alive when the picture's taken. They're pretty much just skin and bones. That's what happens in a concentration camp that's pictured here. You're not fed. The food's going to the actual forces or troops. They can't feed them. They can't take care of them. Basically, these men just rot away to nothing, and they're already thin to begin with. So there's the picture of his execution in front of the Capitol building or the Capitol Dome right there. All right, we'll stop right there for today. So hopefully you guys paid attention.